Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited that you've joined us. Our topic today of the webinar is Cloud Native Development for Continuous Integration with IBM Wazi. Great topic. It's very topical in this time of all kinds of change and disruption. So today's webinar is sponsored by IBM. I'm Mitch Ashley. I'm going to serve as your host and moderator. A few housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar and we will send all participants an email with a link to the recording and the slides. We're also giving away 6 $25 Amazon gift certificates, gift cards at the end of the webinar. So please stick around and find out if you're one of our 6 winners. Now, this is going to be a very interactive session with our speaker today. So we love questions. We'd love to have you enter questions into the GoToWebinar control panel, to the questions tab. You can do that anytime throughout the hour that we're going to be together today. And we'll be happy to have our speaker entertain those questions. So let's move on to our topic, Cloud Native Development for Continuous Integration with IBM Wazi. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Rosalind Radcliffe, who is Distinguished Engineer, Chief Architect for CLM and DevOps, and member of the Academy of Technology at IBM. Rosalind's a frequent speaker, well known in the industry, and I think very well known for her knowledge, experience, and background in talking about not only DevOps, but a whole host of things. So let's move on to our presentation. Rosalind, you're there?
I'm ready and looking forward to this fun discussion.
I am too.
I hope it's going to be a discussion, so get your questions there. Let's start with a little bit about what we've announced recently and what we have come out with, just to get you primed for those questions. And the first thing I want to start with is why and what are we doing? We are trying to bring ZOS development into the modern development practices and make it so that there are no differences when you're doing development using COBOL or PL1 with Kix or IMS from any other platform or any other environment. So the experience from a developer's perspective and onto operations and running system where possible can be as consistent as possible with everything else. And with our latest work that we've come out with, we really are bringing this ZOS development environment into the cloud world. We want to make sure that you, as a consumer, can get access to that ZOS development environment in the exact same way that you get access to, say, developing for a Liberty application or any other container you might deploy in the cloud. We're working towards the right answers for containerization, providing the options for containers for your dev test environment, making sure that as you fit these pieces together, ZOS fits into that enterprise DevOps solution, making sure with ZOS you can provision your resources the same way you can do in any other environment, and help you with that shifting of the testing and the experience left so I can get fast feedback. I also want to make it so that from an operations and a management standpoint, I can do the same kinds of things with automation, infrastructure as code as with other platforms, with, in this case, the caveat that there is a set of capabilities in ZOS. There are these abilities, or ilities, as we say, availability, security, performance, scalability, all of these things that ZOS provides in a better way or a larger scale way than other platforms. And we want to make sure that you can still take advantage of those ilities, but do it in a way that's more consistent from an experience standpoint as other platforms. So let's start with these new announcements. Moving on to the next slide. The first of which is IBM Wazi for Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces. And I know that's a long name. So for the purposes of the rest of this discussion, I'll be saying Wazi Workspaces. When we think about this first piece, we are bringing to OpenShift the developer experience for ZOS, allowing you to do your code development, so your IDE, as well as your sandbox or your test environment in an OpenShift environment, building a COBOL Kix application inside that same containerized world where you would build any other cloud native application. This removes the boundaries of those specialized skills when you're trying to do the development activity, and instead the developers can focus on the uniqueness of the business application, the thing that they're writing. You don't have to learn for that next generation, that green screen ISPF that some of us who are a little older know and love, but you get to choose your own IDE and your own experience, whether or not you want to use VS Code or Eclipse or the Che environment running in a container. You have that choice. You get that IDE with all of the things you expect in an editor: code completion, understanding of the application, metrics for an application. So you really do understand that program that you're working with. And you aren't limited to just seeing the source code. You can see the program control flow, so you can see how it flows. Whether or not you want to use Eclipse code or the Che environment, you get that same modern development experience. You can get that user build, so I can build my code before I've pushed it to the Git repository. And I have, with VS Code and Eclipse, the capabilities to do debug, so I can debug my application. And this Che environment running in a container, or VS Code and Eclipse running on my workstation, connecting into a ZOS, running either in the OpenShift environment as a sandbox or with my existing Z hardware environments. The way I get to do this is with all of those familiar tools. So let's say I want to use VS Code. I'm using it with Git. I have a Jenkins pipeline, and I can do my COBOL code in that environment. When I want to build, I can build on my sandbox. I can do my early unit testing. I can do my understanding if I've built what I was supposed to have built. I can do that development experience, that development circle. And when I'm ready, I push my code and it kicks off the pipeline in that familiar Jenkins pipeline or GitLab CI pipeline, and allows it to flow through for the rest of the testing. When we're focusing on this Wazi Workspaces, we're focusing on bringing this container-based development environment, bring your own IDE, but this true ZOS sandbox running in an OpenShift environment running on the Intel platform. This is true ZOS. It gives you the Kix, the IMS, the DB2, but running in this container so that it has that consistent experience. But okay, I started my development. How do I test this? The next announce and the next slide, we have IBM Wazi Virtual Test Platform. And we can move on to the next slide. And Wazi Virtual Test Platform truly allows you to do this shift left testing by facilitating the ability to stub out all of the middleware. So I'm going to remove the need to have any of the middleware in that sandbox. I can have it there and it's there. I can run Kicksuck and IMS in that environment, or I can do my capture using Wazi VTP, and then I don't need the middleware in order to do my development. I can literally run that transaction on the sandbox without having to configure, set up, get my data, all of those things that are always a challenge when we're dealing with development. I can just use this data file that has been created when I ran the transaction in a test environment, and I can do my development. And I can add Wazi VTP to my build process so that every time I submit something into the build process, it's going to automatically run this and validate that I haven't broken the other programs that are part of this transaction flow. I can use it for things like copybook updates. So when I change a copybook, I can actually afford to recompile all of the other programs that include that copybook, because I can run this VTP test in a way that I don't need the middleware. I can very quickly verify that that change did not break anything. Bringing these two capabilities together, or three capabilities together, if you look at it that way, the Wazi Workspaces with Wazi VTP, I can get that fast feedback, that early feedback, that initial integration testing, all while I'm building my applications in a cloud native development environment. So that's a start. Hopefully that gives you a whole bunch of things to ask questions about. So why don't we move on to the questions we have from our audience?
Great, let's do that. Let's do that. A couple things. Maybe I just want to tee this up with a question of my own, Rosalind, and then we'll get to, because we've already receiving questions, which is fantastic from our audience. How would you describe the current state of DevOps and CI/CD and cloud native in the mainframe world? And I recognize the mainframe world isn't only mainframes, a mix of technology, but what is the current state of DevOps, CI/CD, and cloud native applications?
There's two ways to look at it. What's the art of the possible, and what are people doing today? The art of the possible with these announcements means that you can have, well, even before these announcements, you could mostly have an entire modern DevOps pipeline. You could follow the same processes and practices. And in fact, we have a number of customers who have transitioned to include ZOS in their normal DevOps practices, such that it's just another platform when it comes to a developer experience. It just happens to be that really big, reliable server in the sky. From a development experience and process, it can be the same. And that's the art of the possible, and there are some clients that are there. There still are quite a few clients who are nowhere near there. I still work with clients whose development practices look exactly the same as when I started in 1987. So it's in ISPF development, and they're still using ISPF. So there's a wide range out there. The art of the possible says it's completely possible. And with this latest bring your own IDE support, and with the latest Wazi VTP, we can also really shift that testing left. That's been the last really big roadblock in this transformation. You could do the same process and practice, but testing was really hard. This makes it much easier.
Very good, very good. You know, there's some questions we received from the audience around Red Hat OpenShift, and for example, one of them is you mentioned product will run within OpenShift on Intel platforms. OpenShift's also supported on IBM S390. Linux on System Z platforms. Are the plans to make these tools available on OpenShift Z?
So the first part of that answer is Wazi Sandbox in particular is based on the Z development and test environments capability, which is a Z hardware emulator. So from the sense of thinking about, do I need a Z hardware emulator on Z hardware? I don't actually need that. So it would be a different kind of thing when you did it on Z hardware. But so logically, the sandbox itself, the way it has been built, exactly the way it is with the Z hardware emulator, logically wouldn't move to Z hardware. However, the concept of a sandbox is a plausible thing. Right now, we don't have any plans for that per se. If you're running on Z hardware, generally people use LPARs, or you can use ZVM to spin up instances, and we'll continue to do work in that space. The other half, the Wazi code part, the developer container experience, it is plausible that it would run on Linux on Z. We just haven't tested it and worked on that yet. This is the first release of our Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces support, and since we are building on Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces, Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces would logically need to be supported on Linux on Z first. So that's a conversation we can have, or will have, with Red Hat as to plans as to when that would make sense. That part logically could work there, doesn't today, but could.
Okay. And being these are relatively new announcements, I imagine there'll be a lot of discussions about how you expand support across the tools and platforms.
Absolutely. This is early. We've had the VS Code support there for a while, and you've actually been able to run the capability in the Che environment. But this is our first release in the Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces environment, and we want feedback. We want to learn how the ZOS development community adopts this. What are the additional capabilities? What are they looking for? What will make the experience easier for our customers who choose this path?
Okay, very good, very good. One of the questions I think is important to address here that we received, Tim was asking about what prerequisites, sorry, stumbling over that today, what prerequisites exist to get this up and running? What do you need to have in place?
These announcements have two different sets of prereqs. One, the Wazi Workspaces, that is in an OpenShift environment, and it is running for the Workspaces, it is running in the Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces environment. And so you would need an OpenShift environment with Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces, and then you could bring these containers into that environment. And we're providing the predefined set of containers, and you bring it in like any other additional capability that you bring into the OpenShift environment. So we have the automation there provided for you to just bring these into that environment. So in the case of Wazi Workspaces, it's an OpenShift environment within your organization. In the case of Wazi VTP, it is a minimal install on a ZOS machine. So ZOS, either real LPAR or the sandbox or a ZDNT environment. It's a simplified, it is an SMPE install, but a simplified install to run it in the ZOS environment with some configuration for the capture part. So you do have to configure to say I'm capturing in Kix or for DB2. But from other than that, to run it, you're really just installing it, and then I need the data file and the programs, and I can just run it. So it's really simple to get started and get running. The Wazi Workspaces, you're just bringing it in. So it's also simple, but it has the prereq of the OpenShift environment.
Excellent, excellent. The question kind of related to other integrations or software. Ganesh is asking, how about Eclipse Che and VS Code? How do those work on your desktop? How do they connect into IBM Wazi?
So the IBM Wazi for Red Hat CodeReady Workspaces, in the announcement, we are including a set of capability. So we are including an Eclipse IDE, we are including the VS Code IDE, and we are including the VS Code IDE configured and set up to run in a container in the Che environment. So we're providing all three. All three are defined such that they can connect to whatever ZOS environment you want them to connect to. The Wazi Sandbox being an example, when you run the Wazi Sandbox, you get a port definition and you configure your client so that you are talking to your Wazi Sandbox. And in the case of VS Code, I'm configuring an RSE connection in the Zoe Explorer, the Zoe command line and Zoe Explorer, to say here is how I'm connecting to ZOS. It's using the RSE, the Remote System Explorer capability that most people have running in their Z. And then they connect in and work. So there are three. It's a bring your own IDE choice. Developer is going to choose which one. Most developers choose either Eclipse or VS Code or Che. So it's going to depend on what the developer wants. Most of them are not like me and run all three, but I'm having fun.
It might help too if you could, I know you've touched on many pieces of this. Could you just describe the overall kind of tool chain? If you started from sort of the front end development back through test and deploy, what are the pieces and components as you would kind of construct a picture of that?
Yeah, if we think about that pipeline and that tool chain, and we pick a choice. So I'm picking one choice. There are lots of choices here. So in this example, I'll use Jenkins, but I could have used something else. The developer will work in their IDE, so VS Code or Che or Eclipse, and they'll use Git as the SCM. And that Git, I'll choose, in this case, GitHub. So I'm using GitHub as my SCM. And I, as a developer, work with my source code. I'm cloning my code. I'm getting my branch. I'm doing my development. I'm pushing it back. Then the Jenkins pipeline kicks off, and the Jenkins pipeline does the build process. Once I'm comfortable, I've done my user build, I'm comfortable with this, I push it up. It's going to do the user build. It's going to run the ZUnits that have been created. If I have a set of ZUnits that have been created, it will run the Wazi ZVTP tests that I have. Once it passes that stage, then it goes into an artifact repository as any other source code would, and my Jenkins and build process is going to put it into, I'll say, Artifactory. And from there, it then gets deployed using Urban Code Deploy, and then it can be tested. And so the test tools can vary. We have tools such as Rational Test Workbench that can be used to test against the APIs or functional or performance testing. We also have the new Galasa open source testing framework that also can actually call Rational Test Workbench tests or Selenium tests or whatever kind of tests you want to help you build that set of tests up. The Galasa framework is JUnit except at the next level. So it's beyond the unit testing. It's the integration, regression testing level, but it's built on the model of JUnit so that it allows you to build those tests. And those get run as part of that integration testing And once all the testing passes, then it'll get deployed into production and run. There is in that part, I used Urban Code Deploy as a deploy to deploy into an environment, but I may want to spin up environments as well. And that's where OpenShift and other environments come into place. I can spin up a new instance, and I may use Ansible to help me do configuration of that infrastructure as code as part of that. I may have a pre-configured image that I'm using in my environment. I may have an existing test environment I'm just going to deploy into it. It depends on the stage of testing and the kind of testing I'm going to do. But that's how it kind of fits end to end.
Great. One of the things I think too would be great to clarify, we have a question from Tim about this, about how Wazi differentiates from ZUnit or Wazi, the virtual task platform, something that we're already familiar with ZUnit.
Yeah, ZUnit, to be completely fair, ZUnit in the back actually uses a portion of Wazi virtual test platform. We had to create a technology to allow us to fully stub out in a ZOS environment. And this has been a challenge. We've done work over the years. ZUnit's been around for quite a while and has gone through a number of phases. And last year sometime, we looked at ZUnit and its capability, and even before that, we were looking at what was the right answer, and we really needed a good backend to ZUnit to allow us to do this complete stubbing and not require a debugger. We really wanted this capability, and so we came up with and designed this Wazi ZVTP capability as a backend for ZUnit. But as we looked at this, we went, no, I can use this in a broader context. And so ZUnit is focused at the program level, an individual program, a load module. I'm going to compile the load module, and I'm going to test that load module. I'm going to do my error checking. I'm going to do all the variability at a program level. Wazi ZVTP takes it beyond that program level to the full transaction or to a batch flow, or in some ways to a component of an application. You could actually record an entire application, but that's probably a little large. It doesn't really matter. You're recording a set of actions and capturing that data file. And then I can replay that against that set of programs whenever I want to and how often I want to, unless you make fundamental changes to the programs to change the external calls. The data file that was created can continue to be used. And so one's at the actual load module, individual load module, and the other one sits at this level of much more broader at a transaction or a set of programs, an application, a set of batch programs. However, whatever the scope is you want to use for this larger VTP test versus the individual ZUnit.
Great, excellent. There's also questions about how it manages the ZOS components, DB2, MQ, et cetera. How do you ensure that your testing is consistent with the version of the software running in the real environment, ZOS environment? That's a question from Gio.
So I'm gonna try and unpack the question. So if I don't get it right, ask again. There are different parts to this. So the first one is with Wazi ZVTP, I'm stubbing out everything. So I'm making all the middleware go away, and so it doesn't matter. But with the sandbox, that's where I think you're asking the question. And right now with the sandbox, we are providing the ADCD. So we're providing a pre-built ZOS environment to make this easy, to allow you to get up and running. And so it does have a predefined version of KICS, of IMS, of MQ, et cetera. As we move forward, If you're familiar with the ZDNT technology or Z development and test environments technology, which is what the sandbox is built off of, we allow you to create your own image. And so as we move forward, we will add the capability into the sandbox to allow you to use your own ZOS image in the sandbox. And when you can, then you will be using your own ZOS image, which you should make sure has the same version of all of the software. What some people do with their sandboxes or ZDNT environments is actually run later versions of the middleware or more current versions of the middleware sometimes, because that actually gives them an opportunity to get early testing on middleware upgrades. Obviously, they're going to continue in the later test environments to test on the exact same version of the middleware that they will run in production. But this gives them an idea to make sure that as they upgrade the versions of middleware, they've already tested to make sure that they're not going to have a problem.
Okay, great. Also curious about the load testing. Is this something that the Wazi VTP can help with?
So Wazi VTP stubs out absolutely everything from a middleware perspective. So it's not going to be a load test or a performance test or a scalability test or anything broader than a verification of integration between programs. It's not going to perform. We had one customer who commented the time to run a set of programs, a set of transactions, etc., was some number of minutes, and to run it under Wazi VTP was some number of seconds. The difference is because there is absolutely no middleware, there are no calls, we are removing so much from the flow. You're not in a real system. So Wazi VTP in particular would not be used for that kind of testing. Now, Galasa, Rational Test Workbench, all of those tools will help you do that kind of testing to hit a load, to be able to test what the system can handle. The other important point is Wazi Sandbox, because it's running in an Intel environment, because it is true ZOS running on this hardware emulator, it would not be a use for load testing or performance testing. You are not going to get the same kind of performance when you're doing a hardware emulator on Intel versus real Z hardware.
You know, I think one thing might be helpful too, Rosalind, is there's some pretty, innovative and new things that are introduced in these two announcements. If you were someone listening to this webinar, and maybe you hadn't heard the announcements, or you hadn't really thought yet about how a virtual platform or the workspaces might fit into your environment, there's a bit of a paradigm shift. What are the things that you sort of have to get your head around first to understand how you can leverage the virtual environment and workspaces?
And it's a really good question. This is a cultural transformation. It's changing the way people work. It's changing the way people think about work. It's changing the focus in the way they work. Testing, automated testing, has been a huge challenge in the ZOS space. How do I have an environment? They're usually shared. Well, shared environments mean people are tripping over each other. The data's changing out from underneath you. It's a lot harder to do significant test automation in such an environment. Because of these challenges, we've done things like provide ZDNT to hopefully get more stable test environments, but it's still been this big challenge. And so Wazi VTP is intended to help you with that huge challenge, to allow you to run a set of tests and then allow the developers to work totally independently. Honestly, if I look at the DevOps transformation, if I look at the different tools that are available, it's really hard to say where the best place for anybody to start is, because everybody's at a different point. Everybody has a different challenge. But Wazi VTP may actually be this tool that you can bring into your existing processes, into the existing way you work, to actually get you this environment, this isolation, before you've managed to do some of the other parts of the transition. There are other things that are a little harder to bring in. With the Wazi Workspaces, we are optimized on a modern SCM. We are providing no support for legacy SCMs in particular. Therefore, we're making an assumption. You're already in Git or RTC, depending on what you want to do, but you're already in a modern SCM. If you're already in a modern SCM, you've already started this transition. You've already made a number of changes. And so that assumption is a huge assumption to start out with. Now, could you use and can you use the Wazi Workspaces when you still have a legacy SCM? Yes, I can figure out how to do that, but that's not what it's optimized for. It has been optimized to make the assumption you want to move to modern practices and modern development, and you're going to use in that process a modern SCM like Git. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, developers could and can use whatever editor they want. We've brought in some younger developers into our organization, and even if the files they have to deal with are sitting in PDSEs, they absolutely want to use a modern IDE. And so for the younger developers, you probably could bring in the Wazi Workspaces into the environment. There would be just some extra steps that you'd have to do in that 3270 client in order to deal with that legacy SCM. But we're trying to make this optimized for the transition for the new world. The sandbox, honestly, as long as you're an OpenShift environment, once you have a sandbox up, it's just a ZOS environment that you can get to by an IP address. And if you think about that, that means even if I want to use ISPF, I can connect to the sandbox with ISPF and I can do testing on it. So it depends. And I know that's not a good answer, but it's an answer.
Well, there's a lot of things that you have a really good point. There's a lot of things to consider because this isn't just a tool change or an addition of tools. It's also a way of working change. Could you go back and just restate as clearly as you can what sort of that change in approach that an individual or a team would be taking here around taking this approach with Wazi versus what we've been doing?
It's changing. It's fundamentally changing the way developers work to instead of telling developers you have a 3270 interface, good luck, have fun, I hope you know how to use Super C, and giving them a modern development experience. Now, I'm picking a little. If my age person, somebody who's had a lot of experience with ISPF and is highly used to that environment, that is the environment they're comfortable with. That is the environment they're used to. And so this transition is huge for them. If I'm my son's age, who's in early 20s kind of age, I have a very different background and a very different experience. And so for that kind of developer, this modern IDE is not a big jump. That's what they expect. And now they have to learn COBOL in the banking or insurance system. And so it sort of depends where you're coming from as to what the transition is. So for the bring your own IDE thought process, this really is a change in my actual tool, the way I'm gonna work. The modern SCM changes the fact I can get total isolation, a whole bunch of things that change from that process. With Wazi VTP, we're changing entirely the test paradigm. We're making it possible for the developer themselves to test in isolation their code change. And with a batch program, traditionally, you may have been able to do that because you were running in isolation anyway. You could get your data, you could make it work. But with this transition, we're now giving developers, any developer, no matter whether or not they're using ISPF or anything else, the ability to get that data file, and now they can do development in total isolation. This is something they've not maybe ever been able to do. It's not something that is an experience that they've had because they've always had to deal with this shared test environment. So it's hard to explain. It's because it's just totally changing the way they have to think about things. From some developers I've worked with, this is a huge aha moment in I can really do my work much more efficiently. In others who are not so happy with change, it is a huge shock. But as people get used to, we've had IDZ for a long time, or IBM Developer for Z, and that Eclipse-based environment is a change. But as people get used to it, as people learn that it provides more value, they see value in it. They see the benefit. It's going to take time as people transition if they happen to fall into my generation. But if they happen to fall in the next generation, or actually it doesn't matter what age you are, if you've been using a modern IDE, this is just a modern IDE. It fits that paradigm. It fits what you're used to. It gives you that assistance and that aid that you expect.
You know, it seems like it addresses a lot of sort of next steps in the evolution of creating software from the IDE environment you were talking about, Rosalind, to, yes, we can do automated testing. We can help solve one of the challenges all of us have always had, which is getting access to environments to do testing. You know, it's always a challenge to get things set up properly. Maybe those would be good incentives, or kind of emphasizing the positive things, the benefits of moving to this environment that might help people with transitioning, not just themselves, but the whole organization. Thoughts on that?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've been doing with clients to help them move to IDZ, and the same will be true with this, is find the thing that they can't do or that it's really hard to do in their existing environment and show them how easy it is. The other piece that I find valuable is to not take away the old, sort of. And people always look at me funny when I say this, but let them use ISPF as an editor. We say bring your own IDE, we should mean it. ISPF is actually a pretty good editor for COBOL and PL1 and assembler. It's been built for that. It's a columnar editor. It lets me do the rows. It lets me do cut, copy, paste the way I want to. Oh, I know ISPF well, so I understand it. It's an editor. Okay, I don't care. As long as I have a modern pipeline behind it, if you let people get to it and it's an option, then, and show them the value in the new tools, as in the new stuff. So for example, ZUnit, trying to build a unit test in well, we don't support that. You could do it manually, but have fun. No, thank you. To build one from scratch, just no, thank you. It's kind of like, as I joked, you can build a web service from scratch, but usually you use a tool to generate things for you. Okay, let's make it easy. So ZUnit is an example of something with IBZ. We would say, look what you can do here. You build it here. You can still use ISPF as an editor, but this is the value. And the more we show that value in the modern experience, with the VS Code experience I've been showing developers, the fact that I've got this modern experience, and And actually, if you look at it just the right way, it actually can sort of look like ISPF from the screen color if you're in dark mode. So it's not so unfamiliar. But you can have multiple screens at once. I can see more. I remember in my early days, we got one of those tiger screens, orange screens, so we could have multiple screens up at once. I got that all the time in a modern IDE. I've got that syntax check. I've got those code rules that I can get instant feedback on. Everybody has to deal with security by design or secure programming practices. Well, I can run those security rules in my IDE. I get that feedback right away. And I don't, I get that instantaneous feedback. I don't have to issue a compile to tell me that I had my code syntax wrong. So there are lots of things that you show them the goodness, you show them the benefit, you show them the value, but you don't remove the comfort factor.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. I love your point about you don't have to leave everything else behind, right? Bring current tools with you that still make sense to use, as well as expand to other tools. Now, I know you mentioned the SCM as something, as one part of this strategy. There's also Jenkins and Git. Can you talk about, and Zoe, how do other tools, including open source tools, fit into this architecture?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work to work with open source to make sure that we are plugging into those open source pipelines. So plugging into Jenkins, Galasa, the testing framework. Actually, that was originally an internal capability, and the Kix team have open sourced that testing framework so that it works in this process. The Zoe framework, the Zoe capability, that there's been a lot of work and continues to be work done to provide that modern experience. We used the Zoe Explorer as the way to access Z with the Zoe command line. Now, we connected it to RSE in this case, or the Remote System Explorer, which is available for any ZOS customer, because that is the development access that's been available for years, and it's full function and it gives us everything we need to interact with the Z system. But we're using those open source pieces where appropriate, and then connecting into the enterprise class capability, ensuring we have the right security in the background, ensuring we're taking advantage of the best of the worlds. Git is a perfect example of open source that we're using. Git has done amazingly well in the market, and as it continued to grow, we did the work with Rocket Software to port Git to ZOS. So I have the Git client there, so I can actually use this full pipeline and I can have things plugged together. With Ansible, we're doing the work to extend Ansible to work with ZOS, and the first set of playbooks are available at the Galaxy environment. We're doing everything we can to extend open source where it needs to be extended to make sure it works for ZOS, or like in the case of Jenkins, it actually just works.
How about let's talk a little bit more about the testing part of this. A couple of questions that have come up. One is about the test data and how you manage that as part of this the automated testing in an environment that it's working with. Are there things, aspects of Wazi, VTP, and Workspaces that help you with that?
So for test data, my answer would be get Optum test data management, including test data fabrication, and use it, and or use a test data management tool. There are test data management tools. The one I know the best, the one I've worked with, the one I've worked with clients on is Optum test data management with its fabrication capability, because it's a full function test data management solution to help you manage your test data, whether or not it's Z or distributed, etc. It really does give you this ability to pull data and obfuscate it and mask it and do all those other things you need to do, as well as fabricate data for use in lower test environments. The idea with Wazi VTP is that you would record it in an environment that was already using test data. So for Wazi VTP, we're doing record and playback. So we are going to record what is ever in that test environment, which means you need to record it in an environment that has cleansed data, that has data that you want in your data file, because it's going to be in the data file and it's going to be moved around and used. So you can't use Wazi VTP in a production environment. You shouldn't anyway. And it's not intended for areas where the data has not been cleansed already, because we're just going to record it and allow you to play it back. That's the goal of Wazi VTP. Test data management is provided through other tools, other capabilities, and we're leaving that to the expert products to do test data management. And we're with Wazi VTP, we assume you have that already cleansed data. The same is true for ZUnit. You can use fabrication to generate data for ZUnit, but we're making an assumption with the record and playback capability that you're recording in a test environment with no real data.
You know, Sridhar asks a really important question. He's asking, can we go off waterfall methodologies if we use this new tool? And I think that's a lot of what you're describing.
Yeah, I'll have to say waterfall is a process. You have to move off the process and culture. But yet, I mean, you've been able to move off waterfall for a long time. There's nothing about ZOS that says it has to be waterfall. The reason many people make it waterfall, though, is testing, because testing is a real challenge. With the ability to dynamically create test environments using the sandbox in this case, or ZDNT, which you've been able to do for a while, and with Wazi VTP, we really can shift testing left. We should, as long as customers adopt the cultural change, should be able to move entirely away from those stages of I have to move into this phase and I have to sit here for X number of weeks while I test all my applications together. We really are trying to get out of that mode. And we realized with all the work that we've done with automated pipelines, making sure open source tools fit, helping with testing, we were still running across this barrier of that last or those last set of testing cycles. How do I shrink that testing cycle? How do I get that true shift left? And that's why we did Wazi VTP, to really let the developers and the development team get more of this early integration testing done really early, so they get that fast feedback before it moves on in the environment. You're still going to need to do that final testing in a pre-prod environment, but because you've done so much more testing, you can do more automation there. You can do the automated testing, and you can get rid of those last, 6 weeks in some cases of testing that sits there.
Let's take a few moments, because I know you have some really great resources for folks to follow up from this webinar and available really at any time for them. You want to speak to some of the resources here?
Yeah, one of the things we've been trying to do, and hopefully you've noticed, is we're trying to make it easier for you to get the information about the capabilities, trying to make it quicker, do more YouTube videos. So we've got a set of short or longer videos to show you and demonstrate, as well as more blogs about how this can be used or experiences about using it. So if you look at these lists, you'll notice that they aren't necessarily those old Knowledge Center things we always used to post to. We still have the Knowledge Center, it's still there, but these are in addition to that to be more friendly and to give you more information. Go watch the Wazi VTP demo and you'll get to see VTP in action, get to see how it works. Our YouTube videos demonstrate the capability in a way so that you can actually see it. We also have the Z trial environments that let you play with some of the capabilities. We don't have Wazi VTP or the Wazi Workspaces in there yet, but we're working toward that. But there are other capabilities that are already there. We're trying to make it friendly and easy for you to get to, and have a community for you to go learn about, learn more, and hear from others. We have developers posting blogs. I have a feeling this expert blog might be my blog. Yep, it is. So it's a blog I wrote about ZVTP, and you'll see me posting. I try to get the latest information from my customer experience as well as working with the product, so that you can get started in the best way and you have the best information possible.
Mm-hmm. There's some really great resources. I know I've checked out some of the videos too, even things on just talking about cloud native architecture, some of the things you've also done in addition to things around Wazi. So really great resources. I hope folks will check them out. Also want to just touch on briefly, I happen to know you're working on a book about testing. I think kind of rumor was a sort of working title was Everything You Wanted to Know About Automated Testing, but was afraid to ask. Now it's not out yet, but tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, you definitely know I'm working on that book. So I am, it's kind of fun. You get told by somebody outside IBM you're writing a book, and then you realize it's really going to happen. So yes, I'm working on a book all about testing and all about enterprise testing. So it is focused on the enterprise customer, but it's end-to-end testing. It includes ZOS and the end-to-end perspective to make sure everybody understands that this is, it's not just one space. I can't just test Z and just test, I have to bring this whole world together and try and not only describe and provide one place to go look at what are the definitions, what are these things, but to give a set of stories from customers that I've worked with to share their experiences, to share their lessons learned, to share some of the oopses, as I would put it, the failures, the experiments that went wrong, that gave people an opportunity to change, to shift, to do something different, but hopefully to share those stories so that everybody doesn't have to go through all of the pitfalls, but you can start with some background from what others have experienced and be able to start in a better place. Now, everybody's gonna fail at some point in time. Everybody's gonna come along and oops. But the more I can give you stories to help you avoid some of those common oopses, I wanna do. The other thing I wanna help people understand is how to fail fast, understand the errors quickly as you're working through testing, understand how to avoid some of those common problems. It's a lot of fun. As long as I can get through this process and get it edited and get it out, hopefully it'll be done this summer.
Exactly. Well, full disclosure, Rosalind, you kind of mentioned this. I'm in the background. I'm helping out a little bit with you, but of course, this book is all you, and includes your passion for testing, which is, I think, what makes it a compelling topic to read. So I'm excited for you to have the book come out hopefully soon, and have folks get a chance to find out more about it. We'll share more of that separately as that becomes available. Well, any parting thoughts, Rosalind? I do need to do some paperwork here, if you will, around some gift certificates. Anything you want to wrap up with before we conclude?
Just give it a try. We've got the VS Code available in the marketplace, so you can give it a try. Go out, learn, read about it, and understand that ZOS doesn't have to be different from a development experience. Go have some fun.
I think it's a great suggestion. And the resources that we talk about here, those are fantastic. Please check those out, everyone. Well, there's been a lot of positive response, and I'm not just being hyperbolic about it. There's been a really great response in the chat and then in the questions about these announcements. So congratulations to you and the IBM team on the successful announcements, and looking for great things to be happening on the Wazi platform. So do want to also cover here just briefly our winners of our Amazon gift cards, and our 6 winners are Diane J, ENC, John M., Manas P., Robert H., and Reza A. The folks at DevOps.com, MediaOps will reach out to you and help you get a hold of those great gift certificates so you can order something while you're still under quarantine, get something interesting delivered at home. So thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your time. We know an hour of your time, whether you're working from home or in the office, is super valuable. And we're honored and appreciate that you would spend it with us. So on behalf of IBM and Rosalind and myself and the team at MediaOpsDevOps.com, thank you for joining us today. We wish you the best. Please check out everything about IBM Wazi at the resource we've shared with you. Be safe, be well, and have a wonderful day.